Test, test, test.
Okay, so this makes sense.
Test, test, test. Alrighty. I'm gonna just go shut off the. How does that look from a visual?
It's anyone actually downloading it?
Whitney is, for library members, so.
You go over the jackhammer right outside.
That is a sheet. No doubt. Test, test, test.
Jackhammer right outside.
Test, test. Okay, we are live.
Thank
And everything's running? Okay. Welcome to the special meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. This meeting was called for a single purpose of reviewing the City of Buffalo's 2026 proposed bond sale. As is customary, we will open the meeting to public comment on this single matter discussed at the conclusion of the meeting. Before we begin, I'll ask Executive Director Rowe to take the vote.
Secretary Fox.
Here.
Director Fishkin.
Here.
Director Sanfilippo.
Here.
Director Holmes.
Here.
Director Keenan.
Here.
Mayor Ryan.
Here.
And County Executive Blumer.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. The City of Buffalo is proposing a bond sale scheduled to receive bids on July 14th and closing on July 30th. The meeting materials, including the staff report on this matter, were provided to you in the board packet last week. We have representatives from the City of Buffalo Controller's Office present to answer any questions you may have on the transactions. Additionally, our financial advisor, Mr. Whitney Warren, has joined us remotely. Thank you, Whitney, to discuss the pricing comparison analysis. At this time, I'll turn it over to Executive Director Rowe and Mr. Warren.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Ask for the clicker. Oh, sure. All right, so the 2026 capital budget was approved by Common Council back in November. We reviewed it at our meeting in December 2025, and this commences the whole capital financing for the annual program. The 2026 capital budget consisted of $94.1 million, broken down into new city projects of $38.5 million and district projects of $55.6 million. Because so much time had gone on between when we reviewed it in December, I put a copy of the December report in your packets for you. Okay. Now, just to remind and review the 2025 capital budget, this is the item that has been disputed between the prior administration and the City Controller's Office. The 2025 capital budget was approved at a level of $110 million that was broken down into 3 different components. There were new city projects of $27.2 million, district projects of $55.5 million. This was the first time in a number of years that the district had submitted for a bond for financing. Before that, they were using refunding savings from the Joint Schools Construction Board refundings. And then the city had requested short-term borrowing for reimbursable projects. These were mostly federally reimbursable projects, but you have to spend the dollars before you can get reimbursed. And they needed to have the cash flow to roll that. The city controller objected to the final approved 2025 capital budget as it exceeded the annual recommended debt limit issued by her office, and this resulted in litigation. It was first heard by the New York State Supreme Court in Erie County in September 2025. The court ruled that the city controller is required to sell debt consistent with what was approved by Common Council. It was appealed. It was heard by the New York State Supreme Court, Appellate Division, 4th Department, and in April 2026, this court unanimously affirmed the lower court's decision, and an appeal has been filed with the New York State Court of Appeals. I believe, Delano, you had mentioned that you're expecting late fall to hear if they're going to hear that case. Okay, thank you. In September 2025, however, the city controller did move forward with a bond anticipation note to issue some of the 2025 capital budget. Importantly, no new city debt was sold within this band. It consisted primarily almost 22 million of district projects. And there was 7.7 million for the city's short-term borrowing. So the projects that were approved are still not being issued. Quick little history of our issuance for capital borrowings from 2004 to 2007. When BFSA was in a control period, we issued that on behalf of the city. Those amounts are listed on this slide. We currently have no outstanding bonds. Beginning in 2018, in contemplation of transitioning from a control period to an advisory period, one of the requirements under the act was that the city had to sell bonds, demonstrate that it could access the markets. So beginning in 2008, for this transition, the city began to issue debt on its own. And the city has continued to annually finance its capital program since 2012. 2012, July 1st is when this board transitioned from a control period to an advisory period. Looking at the ratings now, the bond ratings for the city of Buffalo are from 2025. The calendar indicates that bond ratings will be received on the bond tomorrow. But as a reflection, BFSA is rated AAA stable by Fitch and AA1 stable by Moody's. We're now rated by S&P, and the city is rated A+ negative outlook. That changed last year from stable to negative. Moody's A1 stable, and S&P A+ negative. That was also revised last year from stable to negative. Inherently, because we have the ability, legally we intercept sales tax, we have a higher rating. So we'll always have lower interest rates just by the way the BFSA Act is written. All rating agencies do cite BFSA as a credit positive to the city of Buffalo, which helps them with their pricing. Step difference is 3 to 4 steps different depending on the rater. And again, 2026 bond rating is not yet been issued. The controller's recommended debt limit for, this was issued last year on their August 1st, 2025 letter. There'll be one coming up soon. Varies between 28 and 36 million. So a portion of the 2026 capital budget will be sold in this proposed borrowing. So out of the 38.5 million that was approved by Common Council, 25.7 million of the projects will be sold. The difference relates to projects that weren't able to be financed because a bond resolution wasn't able to be submitted or approved.
Jeanette,
Yes.
on that number, 25.7,
Yep.
isn't it actually 24.1 of the 26 capital budget and 1.6 from 2020? If you look at the
Yes.
list of projects.
Yes.
it's actually-
Yes.
So
Yes, sir.
25 project is just a capital overlay.
I'm sorry.
The 25 project is just a standard mill and overlay for city streets that the council tried to get pushed out.
And then none of the projects that were in the capital plan for the school district are included. The controller's office was unable to draft bond resolutions, so they weren't able to include that as financing.
But that's preliminary paperwork. The administration wasn't able to get the paperwork to us to submit paperwork to have a resolution drafted. Administration stated at the time of the capital budget that all the projects that was approved in the capital budget were shovel ready and weren't shovel ready. And some of our concerns is not to borrow, just to borrow. Not this current administration, the previous administration. But they weren't ready. So in regards to, we sold at 25.7, 38.5 is what was approved when we received resolution or paperwork to draft resolution up to 25.7. So that's why we went to market for 25.7.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good.
And of course, big piece of that is the school district, also that
Schools that they weren't ready either.
on any of their.
On any of their projects. So we get all this pushback, but we can borrow, but the paperwork's not ready to, for us to go to, the bond market, to go to, our, bond council to draft the resolutions, to have those resolutions approved by the council to go to the market for it. So that's just what we're saying is, we okay to borrow, but we need to make sure that projects are.
I don't know if that's been out there. You understand?
So on the city side, that's about $14 million worth of projects that have been authorized but not issuing because, or no, not authorized yet. They're budgeted but not authorized. Where does the current administration stand on those projects? Are they ones that?
No, it's a mixed bag. I almost want to pretty close to hit the full reset button on all the prior year authorized but unspent or prior unauthorized. So we have a huge focus on the building side in particular, especially with city court is in dire straits. So we've been doing an assessment of all of our facilities that we have a list of essentially emergency repairs that need to get designed and built out. So our hope, we're working with the controller's office, is to, we're going to kill off like, well, huge chunks of the 25 project plus the other ones in the packet, the board packet about, going back all the way to 2006, I think, or something, the oldest on there. They may have exaggerated, but either way, kill those old projects and then try and free up some space to do these emergency repairs to keep facilities.
So you guys believe some of those older projects just weren't necessary or not a priority? Because you have the emergency stuff you need.
It's a mixture of that, and also the dollar amounts are not where they need to be, right? So we talked about this not being shovel ready, that is a genuine problem on the building side in particular. Streets, sanitation, they're pretty good. They get stuff moving every year, but on the building side, there's a lot of atrophy. Those projects are not truly properly designed and ready to go out, and they want amounts they ask for are often too low to do the actual project. Don't have contingency. So we have our new senior Deputy Commissioner Marie Carone, who's been working through tours of every facility, putting together a list of like critical like life safety things that need to get done at firehouses, at the impound lot, at the Broadway barns, places like that like are actual safety issues for our workers. We want to prioritize getting those things remedied quickly. That'll be another major concern for us, again, in city court, as we have seen elsewhere in New York State. The Office of Courts Administration has intercepted aim, has held aim if municipalities do not properly maintain their required court facilities. So I don't want that to happen. Want to keep OCA happy. City court needs a lot of work, so we want to keep showing progress over there, starting with major HVAC renovations because they have very bad climate control issues in the building.
But it does seem like a large number of these projects should be standard maintenance things. There's a large number of roofs. There's a large number of masonry projects. There's a large number of HVAC properties, which are all going to cost you a lot more money if you don't fix sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Because the buildings are going to fall apart.
And as we emphasized in the 26-27 budget, we have dramatically increased a lot of those lines for routine maintenance throughout the buildings division for those items. We're also hoping to, again, as long as we get, buy and working with control's office, I'm looking for more generic bond covenants on some of these capital projects. The city, from what Mark and I are used to at the county, is highly specific, down to like addresses or like, whereas oftentimes in the county, we'd have a more like countywide roof repair, countywide code compliance, right? It's giving some flexibility. That also means you don't have these chunks of unspent bond proceeds from a project that's highly specific. You can roll them over into, I have a little bit of money from last year's roofing project, put it towards roofing project in this year, right? That flexibility is really important. I'm trying to push us in that direction.
That was actually gonna be my question, was not so much on the authorized but unissued, but the authorized, issued, and not happening. How are you navigating some of those bond covenants where your options are spend the money on the highly specific thing that was originally bonded for, or don't use that money?
So I'm leaning honestly towards not using that. We gave a list, we're at TW, we gave a list for them to chop off of projects that they just closed out that are.
And just use that for debt service?
Chunks off, yeah.
Because eventually, I mean, in some respect, I mean, I wouldn't advocate doing this purposefully. But once you get to the point where the debt service has been completely paid off, for any of those, specific items, those, bonded dollars then can be used, generally.
So this is great to hear that you reviewing, because it was going to be one of my requests that you're able to submit us a report on, and I've got $17.4 million of money that's already cash and not spent. You know, project by project adds up to 17.4. There's $70 million in the 26 capital budget that is not being authorized as of yet,
Right, a lot of which is on the school side, but.
including the school.
Yeah.
But yeah, in total, $42.3 million that's sitting out there that's been authorized, but we haven't issued the bonds yet, much of it being the 25 that's in contention.
Yep.
And another 53.4 million, again, including the school board, that's been budgeted but not even authorized yet. So I think that would be real important to know on all of those.
Yeah.
What will the number be whittled down to
Yep.
when you eliminate some of these projects that you say might not want to be done? Because that in total, that's $183 million that's out there in one form or another that's not being spent as.
Right. Quite a lot of it is in the authorized but unspent category, but same deal here, yeah, we're trying to hit the reset button.
How long will it take for you to complete?
Oh,
that
we
review?
gave the first list over, I don't know,
They want about a month
a
ago.
month ago, and then I have a second pass from DPW too.
Okay.
So what is the
Can
magnitude?
you provide that stuff to us as we're going along?
Yeah, sure.
What is the magnitude like? Is it-
I wish that, we could probably get a little more aggressive, but, you know, we had a good chunk we were able to close out. And I understand that previously, folks, DPW had not been giving me quarterly updates, so we were supposed to have quarterly updates. By of project status, so we're not going again, which is
There
worse.
was 2 updates.
And,
I got efficient.
I mean, it's well over half. Wow.
And it does seem to me that part of the problem of not being able to spend money is a charter revision question of when should the capital budget be started and voted on, so you have enough time to float the bonds and therefore be ready for construction season. 'Cause it does seem like we're missing the season again and borrowing money when you can't do the projects because of the winter is been a problem. Are you looking to do something like that? Would it help that the BFSA put something together to say, or have you talked to the charter revision people about?
This charter revision commission, again, because we really don't have much of a hand in it, because it was set up prior to us coming
Right.
in, is doing its own thing. We're just sort of, I don't know, speaking bluntly, it's more damage control of that entity. We have a separate local law that I had Corp Council draft quite a long time ago, actually, kind of reverse engineering the county's capital project process, as well as shifting the dates around to ensure that the bonds are sold in time for construction season. So once this wraps up, we'll try and seek passage of that local law to modify the charter.
So
The
what
catch
kind,
22 you run into is the summer is the most advantageous time to borrow in terms of interest rates. But it's also not conducive in a scenario where you're kind of cash poor.
Right.
To, do it during the most advantageous time because you need the cash to start the project. So
Right.
it's a bit of catch 22.
Well, why would the summer be most advantageous?
That would be a question, I think, for financial advisors. I just know historically speaking, like the county always does ours in roughly late July time period, because based on recommendations that is the most advantageous time. I think it's, a lot of it has to do with supply and demand in terms of bonding, and I think maybe a lot of larger entities maybe do their borrowing, earlier in the year. So that's going to drive rates up if all of these bond buyers don't have, their weekly, monthly, whatever cash.
but we still have to do an analysis, because if you borrow in July and don't do any projects till the next year, you're sitting on paying a whole year's worth of debt service because you saved $5.
In some cases, though, that timing does make an amount of sense because
Sure.
like So I know, and I'm sure with the city as well, specifically when the county does our like major road reconstruction projects, not like the standard mill and overlay.
Right.
We're going through and digging out all of the drainage and all of that. And oftentimes the DI structures that they're using now are kind of pouring, are precast structures. Well, that takes about 6 months to fabricate. So you want to get those contracts going, in the year before, so that over winter you can get all of that stuff cast to be ready, ready to dig as soon as the ground.
So it almost suggests that you might even want to have 2 bond sales a year, but you'd have to do the analysis to make sure that
Yeah, when
you
the
were
duplicate cost.
saving money with all the other costs.
Cost of
But
issue.
at least it should be part of a discussion to look at, well, what's the optimal process as we're sitting here realizing that this is probably not the optimal process, right?
But it also sounds like you got a lot of internal stuff that you can do in the winter and all, with this health and
For the
safety.
building side?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's true.
Yeah.
But
You probably can't do roofs and HVAC.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a problem. Talked about that.
And also, I'll note in the packet, there's I think the original report, comment on the city, like bonding for like demos and like tree planting.
Mhm.
We're not gonna do that. I'm putting it all in the operating. So there's tons of stuff that should be like a pay-go type project. So.
And at the end of the day, your bonding period, the 1 year, it's just a matter of planning for it. Like, it's still a 1 year, whether it's a rolling 12 months. It's
You just gotta-
knowing. Because I remember us talking about that for years,
Yeah.
As well. Like, oh, should we buy a different time of year? But at least if you're just planning for what the reality is, it's still the
Right.
same 12-month rolling.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be,
Market too.
yeah,
The
and you
rates.
need to be basically 2 years earlier to do this and have it all set up as a process
Exactly.
and with dates and times that everybody knows so that they can do it.
Yeah.
And then the analysis of the rate increases and what's happening. And, we'll talk a little bit more about that with Whitney, I suppose.
But I am glad that you guys are putting emphasis on health and safety type stuff that cause you bigger problems.
Right, that's what I gotta get tackled.
And one other question that I had, have you considered adding Kroll to your suite of bond ratings, given how positively going to Kroll and moving away from Fitch and Moody's
I
had been?
for the county, I haven't had that thought. I mean, that's ultimately their call, but yeah.
They're a bit of an old boys network. And if you get one of them that gives you a favorable rating, a new one trying to, be more aggressive in all of that, that may bring all of the others around the way it did for the county.
Feels to me like we're gonna have like a split, I think, on these ratings. We'll see, but
Jeanette, you want to continue?
Or did you advance the slide? Oh, it isn't working for me now. Thanks. Thank you. So as far as the 2026 bond sale goes, the par amount is 25.7 million. It is expected to generate a premium of roughly 2.6 million. It will be tax exempt. The final maturity is July 15th, 2037. Estimated cost of issuance for this bond is $129,900. The underwriter's discount is 0.15% of par, or $38,543. The estimated true cost is estimated at 3.06%, which would bring total interest to $7,348,000 for total P&I of $33,044,000.
I'm rusty on this stuff.
What's
I haven't done any borrowings in a while, but can someone explain what the premium and what the underwriter's discount?
The underwriter discount charges a fee for their services, so they charge a flat 0.15% of par.
Discount, it's a cost.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And premium is if you go to market with a coupon rate that's higher than anticipated, the investors will pay more
They're
for,
like higher interest on lower principal rather than lower interest on higher principal for whatever.
right, right.
It's Jeanette, if I can jump in.
Yes, Whitney, thank you.
Premium is generated when you have a coupon, so the interest rate you're paying on the bonds is higher than the yield. Ultimately, and that results in a price of a bond of, let's say, over 100. So 100 is a par bond that you sell a 5% coupon at a 5% yield. So you're paying $100 for the face value of the bond, and at maturity you receive $100. If you were selling a 5% bond at a 4% yield, you would pay, let's say, $110 for that bond that would ultimately pay you $100 at maturity, but you would receive those 5% interest payments over the life of the bond. So it's more about the dynamics between the coupon and the yield. So if you had a coupon that was lower than the yield, so a 4% coupon and a 5% yield, you would have a discount bond, or a bond that you often see these. I see these with treasuries a lot, where you're paying, let's say, $90, but then at maturity you get paid out $100 with some, with a 4% interest rate. So that's what results in the premium. If you're selling $10 million of bonds, but you're selling them all at a premium, you receive, well, in this case, $2.5 million of premium, because you're selling a 5% coupon or a 4% coupon at a yield that's lower than that.
So this premium of 2.5, almost 2.6 million is roughly 10% of the par amount. Is that typical?
Yeah, it certainly can be. I mean, in this case, and we can obviously get into it when I go through the memo, but these bonds are being sold fairly short on the curve, so interest rates are lower than if you were going out 30 years. But as you can see, the estimated true interest cost is 3.06. So you're selling mostly 5% coupons at a 3% yield. So that's a fairly bit. That's going to generate a good amount of par as a percentage. Sorry, a good amount of premium as a percentage of the overall par.
Let me ask another way: is a higher premium better for the city, or for the bond?
Generally speaking, yes. It's an indication of that you're getting a low yield. I would say that generally, because industry standard these days is around a 5% coupon. If you made a decision, or if the city made a decision that they wanted to have a really low interest rate that they were paying, so if they wanted to keep their debt service payments low and issue a 3.5% coupon, that's a decision they're making, and then the interest rate, the yield, may be 3%. You're going to generate less premium, but that doesn't mean that they didn't reach their objectives in getting a lower debt service. It's just it's a choice, but investor preference is usually more towards the 5% coupon. So I would say a 3% yield is generally indicative of good yields. But I mean that's kind of on a case by case basis, depending on the credit worthiness of the entity. Hopefully
Thank you.
Answers. Yeah.
Basically take the par amount and the premium, you add those together, and that is your spendable proceeds towards the project, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the premium gets rolled in with the interest, so the interest you see in your sort of amortization schedule is a little bit higher than that.
And these numbers were prepared by our financial advisor?
No, that was prepared by the city of Buffalo.
The city of Buffalo,
Financial
okay.
advisor.
Whitney, do you have anything to say about this slide? Give you an opportunity to say whatever you want.
I'm certainly happy. I mean, Jeanette, does it make sense to go through the memo now, or would you like me to hold off for a minute?
All right, I got a couple more slides and then we'll go through the memo, if that's okay?
Yeah, and I think the memo certainly touches on that slide, so I can speak to it then.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So the next slide, I've put together a 10-year schedule of what the new money capital financing has been this is just for the city of Buffalo. It's not for anything school district related, which is why 2025 is blank on here. In 2020, we had the COVID-19 pandemic that hit right when they were looking at selling bonds in the market. It was very volatile at the time. It was determined that a ban would be most appropriate, and they sold a lower amount of projects that they needed that money like immediately up front for just a 1-year period. So that's why you see it jump from 2020 to 2021, because that's really, I kind of look at it as a blend between the 2 years. So when you blend it, on average, 23.6 million. So the amount that has been sold over the last 10 years, there haven't been any real significant swings over a 10-year period.
Is there an ability at some point, with these sort of analyses to be able to get a, schedule of existing debt service for maybe like the next 10 years or so? Or simply because, like, from my perspective, right, the actual amount of bonds sold is not nearly as important or relevant as the amount of debt service anticipated annually for that, compounded with all of the existing debt service of what you're able to pay. And specifically, every year you have a certain amount of existing debt service that falls off because of the maturity of those bonds. So in theory, as that falls off, your capacity to absorb debt service increases because, to get back to even what your status quo was. So that would be nice to see, especially when we're talking about the sort of recommended debt limit. Part of this is, at least from my perspective, I care more about a recommended debt service limit than a recommended debt limit itself. Because frankly, nobody locally is going to go anywhere near their available debt limit. I think New York City is shockingly close to theirs. But like Erie County has pretty darn close to like $1 billion of, debt limit, and we'll never go to that. It's really more about the debt service.
To that point, Mark, in our 4-year plans that we've been showing for the city, is debt service broken out, and does that accommodate these?
It is, and we cranked it up. We cranked it up.
So right now it's like 30 million.
Yeah, I think we did a 25% increase for next year, and then.
All right, so you're anticipating a higher debt in those projections.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the difference there is when you're doing the 4-year plan, you're also adding on top of the existing debt service in anticipation of future. It would be nice to see, where those sort of debt service cliffs are, where you have a lot of maturity in 1 year or another. Because I know, like, the county specifically, we had 1 year where we went from about $60 million of annual debt service down to about 38 million. Because we just happened to have a lot fall off. Now, some of that was done strategically to a degree where, when we come up with our blended rates based on the PPU, we're trying to take the minimum, length of debt service. Like when we did our stadium bond, we could have done 30 years, but we chose to do 25 years instead, to kind of create some of those. But that's really, in my mind, what's particularly important strategically for the city. Knowing when those will come up might give them 1 year or 2 years where they can increase the amount of borrowing that they do, and it not really have a material negative impact because they lost 4 or 5 million of debt service.
Right.
Okay, the next chart shows the unspent unencumbered bond proceeds. This is as of May 31st, 2026, and it's for the city of Buffalo only. So there was a small amount that was still hanging from the district ban, and even a much smaller amount from the cash flow borrowing for the city of Buffalo, but that's excluded from here. It's in the report that's in your board book though. So in total for the city of Buffalo, 15.4 million is outstanding. In total, since 2017, that is equal to 8% of the par amount of bonds or bans that have been issued. It's more heavily concentrated, as you can see, in the last 2 years, with 19% outstanding from 2023 bond sale, or 4.4 million, and 23% from the 2024 bond sale, or 5.7 million. And the final slide, I'm going to hand it over to Whitney Warren in a moment, but this is a summary since the BFSA transitioned into an advisory period. The estimated savings that could have been acquired if BFSA issued debt on behalf of the city of Buffalo. Summarizes the reports, and then the 2026 report has been provided in your board packets. And Whitney, I'll turn it over to you so you can discuss that report.
Thanks, Jeanette. Happy to. And sorry that I'm not able to be on video. My internet is a little unstable, so hopefully this helps. I guess I would start with, unlike in prior years where frequently our memo and our analysis has been completed post-sale, in this case, we were tasked with analyzing the potential difference of BFSA issuing debt prior to the sale of city bonds. So in that case too, we approach this from a perspective of not knowing quite yet what the ultimate ratings would be from the city. I believe, Jeanette, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those are expected next week at some point in time. So there will be more clarity. Yeah. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, some of this.
Can I ask a question regarding the ratings?
Absolutely.
Are they utilizing the updated budgetary data relative to how they're gonna rate us from negative?
Yes. We had a ratings call last week with S&P. Controller's office, along with administrators, and answer questions from both rating agencies, and they asked questions about the fund balance, asked questions about the gap reports for fiscal year 26, how it's gonna finish 26, and then I guess some of the concerns in the 27 budget. So we had a good conversation with both agencies, and they'll do their review, they'll do their analysis, they look at the media, they look at the gap report, they look at the budgets. So they're very familiar with what's going on with the city.
Did you get any reaction from how they were receiving this data and believing that perhaps we may take the negative out of
My take on it, on the calls, both agencies saw the positive direction the city's going in overall administratively. Moody's analyst, who was more concerned about Buffalo's, did ask more schools-based questions and seeing the trend line on the schools versus seeing budget gaps, worrisome. So if I had to make a guess, I think Moody's might downgrade, S&P might upgrade.
Okay, I was just curious as to whether we thought there was a possibility that the negative outlooks would be amended based on the budgetary approval.
I mean, like Deputy stated, they expressed their concerns. I was surprised that they were more concerned with the board than the city, especially with us using more cash throughout the fiscal year. But as both stated, it's a panel, and they think from a panel perspective that maybe the ratings could be affected, but they will let us know.
And that's going to come tomorrow, you said?
This week.
Well, good job, you guys, though, on your presentations, I'm assuming, to them.
You're trying to sell it. I mean,
Well, you know who to go to if there's an upgrade,
oh, yeah.
as far as, getting a raise.
Whitney, if you want to continue, please.
Absolutely. So, with that in mind, we approach this analysis contemplating a comparison of BFSA to both the city's current rating. So that's been discussed on an earlier slide, the A1 stable, A plus negative, and then a potential downside scenario where, as I've discussed with Jeanette prior to this meeting, typically we don't see rating agencies like to just sit on a negative or positive rating. They like to eventually, it's an indication that they'd like to make a decision one way or the other, and it may, in many cases, return to stable, but they don't like to just sit on a rating. So the other component of this was contemplating a potential downgrade based on the negative outlook to an A2 stable, A stable rating. So based on that, we performed analysis similar to what we've done in the past. We spoke with
Did we lose them?
I don't know if you can hear us, Whitney, but we've lost you. Is he completely off?
You could call them.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I asked him to call in.
The only.
While we're waiting, I just had one question. What is the column for PD savings?
Present value.
Present value, okay.
Yeah.
I just was sitting there and I'm like, I have no idea.
No, it's so you can add up all the years.
Gotcha, okay. Okay, that makes perfect sense now.
I'm obnoxious that way teaching.
Yeah.
That's every one of my students. You can't just add numbers up.
No, he was saying that his internet was unstable and opposed.
So maybe,
Can you hear me now?
yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
Did we lose you again?
Are you talking with me? If so, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
I do not.
Was that noise from logging off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm just gonna, I'm sure log back in.
Well, while we're waiting, I guess the question that I have is, how are we thinking about a model of an optimal debt service, which doesn't just take into account the financing, but also takes into account the costs and benefits of not doing the projects?
Hi, can you hear me? I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, apologies. I don't know where where I cut out, so I can try to retrace my steps.
Pretty early in the process.
You were just
good.
talking
Oh.
about how rating agencies don't want to sit on a negative outlook for too long.
Okay, yeah, so they typically don't want to sit on a negative outlook, in which case, we both looked at the current city rating and in a downside scenario where tomorrow, for instance, they would get downgraded to the A2 rating range. And then, much like we've done in the past, we then compared the BFSA performance in the market to where we expect the. Oh, did I cut out again?
No, you're good.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm so sorry. To where, we worked with PFM's pricing group, which is our kind of group who's in the market 3, 4, 5 times a week, to get their thoughts as to how BFSA would price and how the city would price under the current scenario and the downside scenario. What we received from them was, and you'll see that in the first chart of the memo, is a BFSA spread of roughly 5 to 16 basis points spread to the AAA yield curve. So that's the AAA BVAL, which is a Bloomberg-based indices that we price deals off of. So we believe the BFSA would price about 5 to 16 basis points wider than that AAA curve, based on the maturity in which we're pricing the bonds. For the city, we felt like that spread would be more something like 13 to 29 basis points. And so that's a differential of roughly 8 to 18 basis points of benefit by pricing through BFSA. On the downside scenario, that differential widened, and you'll see that it's 5 basis points across the curve. So if they kind of think that if the city were downgraded, it would be 5 basis points penalty. That's of course if it's downgraded 1 notch. If it's downgraded 2 or 3 notches, that's a whole nother story that we could analyze. But that certainly slipping below the A level has a much bigger implication than just going from an A+ to an A. So what we found was, and much like in the past, we've made adjustments for BFSA's higher cost of issuance. So the need to have additional financial advisory, additional bond counsel. So we adjusted for that. I would say a relatively conservative $75,000 for those. The results show that the benefit of pricing this particular transaction, so this is only an 11-year transaction through BFSA for the $25 million of proceeds that are needed, is roughly $242,000 overall, or around $20,000 annually. On a PV basis, and I know someone had that question, we use the ARB yield, so the kind of to discount those cash flows to show what that value is to BFSA pricing versus the city in today's dollars. So that would be $204,000. That benefit widens if it's BFSA versus a downgraded city. So it widens to a $336,000 benefit versus a $280,000 benefit. And then further, we had looked at, we pulled out or extracted the spreads that we believe capital markets had initially provided the city. And based on the differential between what PFM believes the city's spread should be, to capital markets advisors, we believe that benefit to be even wider of $354,000 or a PV of $298,000. So I know Jeanette and I have discussed this quite a bit. That's not an insignificant amount of dollars, $204,000 on a PV basis, but obviously that number becomes more impactful the farther out you go on the yield curve, if you're issuing debt that's longer than 11 years, or if you're issuing more par, it's obviously going to have a greater impact. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. I know there was a question about ideal times to issue. I would say that certain factors do come into place when we're thinking about that. Ultimately, I think it is important to just keep in mind what works for the city or for BFSA, the optimal time to issue debt. I do think that there are times when investors have more money. So June 1st is a big interest payment date, and there can be a lot more money in the market at that point in time. We typically try to avoid late or earlier mid or late December, just because deals are trying to get in right before the market shuts down for the holidays. So there's a number of different considerations. I would say over the last couple months, we've seen a tremendous amount of supply in the market, and have had some, nerves about going into the market with certainty, meeting that supply with a lot of demand. There's a lot of money flowing in, and many of the deals that we've been pricing have received tremendous reception. On a day-to-day basis, I'd say that's more of the question here. Volatility around the Middle East has a much bigger impact when you go out to pricing. So, or maybe, for instance, a Fed decision. I know I was in the market a couple of years ago with an issuer doing a competitive sale, and we pulled the deal just because of volatility around Fed decisions, and priced 2 weeks later. So I would say that would be my bigger concern about timing, rather than kind of trying to cherry pick the ideal date, is just being somewhat flexible around the volatility that we're seeing in the market, and being able to make slight adjustments if there is a high level of uncertainty on the day or on the week of pricing.
So Whitney, from your municipal bonding, do people borrow in the Northeast in February and March to be able to meet the construction period, or is that abnormal?
Maybe I'm not following your question. I mean, we certainly have clients who issue in February and March. With respect to, sorry, what do you mean with respect to the meeting the?
We have a construction period that's probably going to start in April or May and go through September or October. So having the funding to be able to do that and have it in place in time, what would you recommend a good time to borrow would be?
So the way we usually think about it is if you have a reasonable expectation that you're going to be the project is going to be started and completed within the space of 2 years, then you should be able to, even if you're issuing bonds a little early, and then the construction period starts a little later, and you're sitting on those funds, you should be able to invest those funds without any sort of yield restrictions, and really limit your carrying costs. So we don't typically see, I wouldn't be overly concerned by borrowing in February or March, and then not starting until May or June or July, or even August. If obviously the longer it goes, there's a greater question of when is the construction going to be completed, but you should be able to mitigate a lot of those carrying costs by, assuming the money is not just going to sit there earning nothing. It's going to be, and the yield on these bonds is 3%. So you should be, treasuries at a 3-year treasury is at 4.15 right now. So you should be able to easily mitigate the carrying costs of holding that debt for the time until it takes to start construction and start the draw schedule.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
Whitney, given the over $200,000 in present value savings on this particular issue, and the almost 3.3 million savings that could have been realized over the last several years, is there any reason for the BFSA not to be issuing the debt instead of the city?
I mean, it's,
Right now, yeah.
We could still issue.
No, so that we tried to get authorization. That was one of our big push, was to get you guys authorization to be able to issue geo bonds in addition to the debt bonding, right? So kind of the scary dollar figure that I put in legislation wasn't just for debt bonding. That was actually to start doing geo bonds for you guys to get those savings, but if the assembly freaked out at it, they just hated it.
And is that because these mature after the June of 2037?
I know, I think state legislators don't like the.
We can't issue any geo debt now?
I thought we could.
I thought we couldn't.
I thought we could too.
So we could issue up to 175 million.
I thought we really
We
could
can't
issue
issue without the state. We can
general
But we can
obligation.
issue GO, as long as it doesn't mature past June 30th, 2037. That's where I think the hiccup is right now is
Yeah,
that.
those were my,
So,
I'm sorry, John, I didn't mean to interrupt. Those were some of the general questions I was gonna ask is, let's just say this body takes on the, debt burden for issuing the bonds on behalf of the city. Does that extend the life of this body as an entity?
No, we-
No, it can't go beyond 2037, is what I'm telling you.
Right.
The debt maturity.
I mean, we'd have to have an announcement after the legislature to extend the BFSA to not sunset.
Or you could-
Close to it.
Or you could turn over the bonds to another entity when you expire and the city then assume whatever the rest of the bonds. Well, that's a question. I don't think it is. We'd still.
Okay, so now, in the event that they extend maturity past, instead of 10 years to 15 or 20 years, we would have to go back to the legislature to get that extension as far as our.
Figure out some sneaky legal.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if we issue debt now that matured before the expiration of life of the FSA, that would be okay.
Share obligation.
Yeah. And this exceeds it by 1 month.
15 days.
Can I ask a question of Delana?
Sure.
Has your financial advisors reviewed this analysis? I mean, yeah. Well, do you think they should? Don't you think there should be comparable? I mean, obviously, we're hearing what PFM is projecting. I was just wondering whether or not capital markets.
I'm pretty sure it has, have you talked to them directly?
I have in other years that done this.
Well, I was saying, if they haven't seen it yet, I'd like to see whether or not they agree with whether the projected cost savings.
I think that's what the appendix was intended to represent to me. So the capital markets advisor spread is in here. Our numbers were actually more conservative, more lower than what capital markets projected.
Who is
So
capital markets?
that's
That's
their
the city,
city of
that's the
Buffalo
city's
financial
financial
advisor.
So they're up to 300.
Exactly. So
And-
we did encompass that here as well. So you have that.
Okay, and looking at the cost of issuance, it's, on the statistics. Did they say that the 75,000 additional bond council and BFM costs are already in there? So it's almost like break even relative.
No, this is.
No,
just
75 are already
75,000.
Still 200,000.
So we're still at.
That's after the 75.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
Yeah,
cost
that
of
is-
issuance.
That's after the 75.
That's been.
That's after, so. Because the one says 193,000 and change, and theirs is 192,910. I mean, it's kind of insignificant, and so I wasn't sure whether or not that was the 75,000 was already included in those numbers. Just like I'm.
Well,
yeah, the 75 is considered as part of it's structured into the hypothetical BFSA issuance. So the savings is what you see there. It doesn't have to net out the 75.
Okay, because it says like 193, 290, of course, it's pretty small to look at, but the cost of issuance numbers on the statistics is pretty even, I would guess. I'm reading off this chart here.
Yeah, I know, but I,
Yes.
I thank you for that. I can take a look and get back to you on why those are similar, but that's a good observation. I don't know. I have to go back and look into it.
Okay, yeah, because, all right, then I just, like I said, the cost of issuance numbers are relatively equal.
Yep. No, that may just be a typo.
Okay. Well, that's when I wanted to know whether or not capital markets was reviewing these numbers. I mean,
We've been looking at this is something we've said over the years. It's almost savings of $242,000 last year. Even with the city's financial. This is still not, how much further is that? Yeah. Maybe two goes, we understand, fine or what to go to the market. I think what we've been doing is not a debt issue. It's an operation issue.
I don't know if Whitney got to answer my original question. Is there any reason not for the BFSA, other than what we've heard from other members here about whether or not it's legal and?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that from a purely financial standpoint, the BFSA clearly, and because of the lean on taxes that BFSA gets, they will always have a higher rating than the city. A higher rating results in better pricing when you go to issue bonds. So, certainly I think it becomes a much bigger conversation if the city gets downgraded. Right now, it's the 208,000 or 200 and something thousand of PV benefit to issuing through BFSA if the city retains its current rating is still meaningful dollars, but I think my understanding is there's kind of other, and this has been the case most of the times we've been on these calls, is that the real decision is not just a purely quantitative decision. I can show you these and say that yes, BFSA issuing through BFSA will save money because you are a higher rated credit, but if there are other conversations, then those are ones that obviously we won't have as much of a insight into.
thank you. Other questions for Whitney? Other questions for Jeanette or Delano? For Ben?
I do have a question for
Go ahead.
The controller's office. And Mark brought up the importance of the amount needed in debt service as we go forward to handle higher debt issuance. Is the controller's position of the 26 million or 28 million up to 36 million over the next few years? One, is that just city or city and school board? And how much does it matter what the analysis of funding included for debt service in the projections as on those numbers? Sorry, that was more complicated than it was meant to sound. Let's start with, does it also include the school board? And it's not impacted by the amount of reimbursement that the school board would receive, or
Well, as she stated, or that would be considered. If we look at, I think first, borrowing that we did in September of 29 million to the schools, that's the money set up, so also a lot of state government, we have 7 million city projects, now we're supposed to have 100%. So she will look at if a project is reimbursable by, we have reimbursement funds, committed funds from the state and federal government, excuse me, do some lower
I don't see how that works out if the $29 million was issued and you had a $28 million cap or whatever. And all,
Look at it, 29.
everything that was issued was reimbursable, so,
That's why we issued. Issue as a ban.
so why not issue another 28 of items that were not reimbursable?
Well, that's part of why we're in court now.
I'm just trying to understand the rationale though. You just said that you take those into consideration.
Consideration, not that we're gonna do it, we'll take those into consideration, and go above the cap if they have that range.
So you had a cap of 28, but you issued 0. Or you issued 1 maybe. Okay, yeah.
I mean, if you remember, we had this discussion a number of times, and we've discussed a debt policy that takes into consideration, at least my suggestion is a 3-tiered system where you automatically issue all debt you're going to get back. It's basically a cash flow issue that shouldn't be part of your debt analysis. The second part should be for regular maintenance and having a schedule where you make sure your health and safety and other things are done. And then a third part, which would be if you had a major project or something like that, that could be considered to add to that debt structure. So maybe at some point we would make a recommendation. I mean, I would hope we might talk more about how that might look and how that equation that we would recommend to be appropriate, and looking at what other cities do, looking at other regulations that other places do, that we're not just looking at our present analysis, as we go along, because that may be things have changed, and I think some of that changes with interest rate changes and bond changes too. So we need to sit down and talk about that. So I would recommend that maybe in the future we have a bigger discussion on that concept. That's good.
Well, let's define the in the future though, because we've been hearing that for a long time.
Well, I would sit down now with the deputy mayor and try to come up with where they are, where the controller is, and then maybe we can get back to you. Is that a reasonable, and then.
Yeah, I think to extent, I think both sides are waiting for the courts to get done with this thing, right? And then,
I don't know why though. I don't see why that makes a difference. Even if the controller were to win, it only says that she does have the power to set that. Doesn't necessarily mean she has to, or that it's the right.
yeah, and that's what we have these, I think, other conversations about, just to see if we can voluntarily agree to certain things, like retired older projects, doing the health and safety stuff, I'm still worried about on the building side, and things like that.
And borrowing based off needs, not wants, and having plans on every fund. That's part of the discussions that we are having with the church. But I think the boss will be able to talk about.
The thing about the lawsuit is this appeal, the council's decision as to what our needs versus wants and not the comptroller's one.
We're not saying that.
That's the court
We're
case.
not making that decision on needs and wants. We're just asking that you borrow based off the needs of the city, not the wants where you have dollars just sitting on the books.
But the procedural status of the lawsuit is that the controller's office is lost and has filed, they do not have an appeal as a right. The appeal is by permission, and the appellate division or the Court of Appeals, if I would handicap, I would say it's a better than likely chance that most appeals will be heard, and that's probably 10%, maybe 5 to 10% chance that it gets heard. And most cases, maybe a 2 to 5% chance that the Court of Appeals takes it up. So
You don't
it's very
see,
unlikely.
appeals being honored for unanimous decisions.
It's very unlikely. It's an interesting issue for the Court of Appeals, but it's not likely they're gonna take it up.
You'll allow me to do it, so if it ever happens. Well, I
Guess we'll always move on.
Well,
Process.
but I think we can start to move forward with our discussions, start to look at the analysis of some of this, where we can go and talk about, well, what do other cities do? Because I think we look at our policies that were set up when we were in a control period and when we were tight to the tax cap, it's very different than where we are now. So let's think through the process and talk about that. At least that's what I would do as we go forward. Are there any other questions or anything?
I have
Go ahead.
just a couple quick questions. I don't want to hold everybody up.
Yeah.
You know, we're, talking about the historical review. We have close to $16 million of issued but unspent bond proceeds. And then I don't know what percentage of the new sale, the 25 million. I don't know how much has been encumbered or expended for those projects. And then what is the status of the ARPA funds that had to be spent by December 31st? What if, you know, where are we as we're the completion of those projects or encumbrances or expenditures of the close to $60 million of debt issued but not spent?
So on ARPA, we did manage to get council basically blanket approval for the Commissioner of Finance to make any adjustments as needed to adjust project recipients and get things going there.
So in other words, those projects will be done or completed by December 31st?
A little bit of cash out. We'll be tough, but we now the legal framework to do so, which is the whole other.
Okay.
So gave the council time to voice, you know, like wanting to go to some adjustments and that not the province space especially, so better shape there. On the bonded but uncompleted projects, when that first pass, we built a couple million, right? Take it a little bit, and then second pass, I think all another pretty big chunk that's gonna get cut off, so working through that.
Yeah, no, I'm obviously you inherited all this. This is not your, but I'm just thinking that, you know, we got $16 million worth of unspent bond proceeds that taxpayers are paying the debt service on for projects they don't have built yet.
More cost, but we do have, I'm sorry. See,
That was a dig directly.
He had to give it back. It's all right. It's okay. It's really fire. It's okay.
We'll have our report coming out. Project Act.
So then where are we in changing the way you bond projects so that you can move money around so this doesn't? Do you think it's gonna happen for this year?
It'll be for the 27.
Yeah, but-
Yes, I think you'll see it radically change. Maybe
We should get through the council. Okay.
even if I don't get to the council, just informal, it's a formal process. The mayor can direct myself and Mayor Bates to speak how it's been done before, with it being very more OSP directed and this weird like citizens capital committee. You know, it's a citizen, yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, anyway, and have an actual real committee of, you know, DPW commissioner, senior deputy commissioner, controller's office, you know, finance deputy sheriff, right, Tim, you're very familiar with that, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah.
Does the Public Works Department have the capacity to undertake processing all these outstanding projects?
So I'd say no, but we're getting there, and we also have another tool. So we're bringing it, we have Marie, is very helpful. We just great project managers like Alan, one of our architects. I also had an interesting meeting with the Dorm Authority, and the Dorm Authority offers project management services. It's one of the sort of unique features they have that I was unaware of it before. So we're also looking at seeing what we can chunk off over to them. So we're also a low fee. They have a Buffalo office. They're very experienced in doing obviously mega construction projects at universities, right? So they know how to run a big building project. They also have a plug and play. They have a on-call, you know, HVAC person, they have on-call electrical, right? So they have contractors already plugged in that they can just go to without bid process. So, yeah.
No, I think they're probably under a lot of pressure or a lot of stress to try to get these projects done.
I mean, as you can see on the street side, you know, again.
Perfect timing,
I was on main phase 3.
Come on.
Good. If there are no more questions, may I have a motion to approve the analysis discussed today? Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. Are there any members of the public present that would like to comment? Anyone online or?
Seriously?
No? Leah says she comes on and goes off, so. This concludes the meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everybody. Good meeting.